And before that, I think it is very important to mark us today. Like, why do we do today? What's the key important date? There are many urgent action that we could talk about, but this month it would be 50 years of the urgent actions, and I think Emily will be sharing a little bit of a little bit of history. But before we go, and I think a very quick background is the first time it was the first actions, if I'm not mistaken, it was the letters that we sent to the professors in Brazil. And after a couple months of sending letters, one of the Department of Public Orders and Security headquarters said that to his wife, that your husband must be more important than we thought, because we have got all this letter from all around the world. This just to say, like, everyone, no matter who you are, they are important, and to see that the spotlight's still there, people still watching, I think it gives such a sense of you're no longer being forgotten, not by us watching, not by the world's watching. Okay, so I think a little bit of background of what we're going to see, or what we're going to talk about. We were talking about the inside history, does it work? So now I would like to introduce our panelists. There are 4 panelists in total that we are that will be sharing with us. First, maybe we'll go with Emily. Emily England, she's a senior campaigner in the Global Individual at Risk teams at Amnesty International Secretariat. So Amnesty is alongside with her colleagues, May Caroline, she also a global campaign that reads on right for right cases, which also bring the individual at risk case to the global letter writing. It's a massive letter writing campaign and the world's biggest human rights event. Amnesty, Emily also supports a country team using urgent actions and case file, Amnesty main campaigning tool for individual at risk work, and advise on ethics and consent of campaign as well. Like, when we work on human rights work and trying to work on the campaign, consent and ethics is very important. So we'll have Emily with us today to share. Second is we have Alex Bamford, หรือว่าคุณ Alex. คุณ Alex has been everything for Amnesty Thailand. Now he is a volunteer in Thailand to circulate the urgent actions. He has been said in the memo that's been more than 40 years. And has been a member and deputy chair of board for Amnesty Thailand as well. He is now retired, and he is still, every day still teaching English and on a sense of the human rights, and also, teaches in development, and he is also a writer. The third we have here is Rung Panasaya. Rung Panasaya is an activist. She also a part of the Amnesty urgent actions and a part of individual activists that we brought the massive campaign that we just mentioned, Right for Right, in 2021. And I think the Rung will share a lot of what's going on, and also congratulations, Rung, for your graduations again. The last we have with us, I think the Smriti Singh, Deputy Director for Campaigns and Communications in South Asia Regional Office. And I think today Smriti will also share as well, this is not just in Thailand or in London, but this is, Protect the Protest campaign is a global campaign, and what's happening in South Asia is as important. And I think Smriti will share a little bit on the highlighted country that we are working with and the utilizations of the urgent action today. Okay, nevertheless, let's start the conversations, and hopefully, we will enjoy. If there are questions, don't forget to type in the chat. We will make sure that today will last until 8:30 with Q&A. So just make sure you write your question down, and we hopefully will have time to share. Okay,ค่ะ. So we'll start with Emily then. Emily, so would you mind to share a little bit around 10 minutes of what's the beginning of urgent actions, how the letter writing campaign has been is what it is today, and yeah, around 10 minutes, and the floor is yours. Yeah.
Thank you very much, May. And it's really nice to be
นะ
here
ครับ
and
ก็มีความยินดีที่ได้เข้ามาร่วมกัน แล้วก็เจอทุกท่านนะครับใช้เวลาในการเฉลิมฉลองUrgent Action ด้วยกันนะครับ ก็เดี๋ยวจะให้ความเป็นมานะข้อมูลเกี่ยวกับความเป็นมา
As May's mentioned, the urgent action as of the 19th of March will be 50 years old, which is incredible, really. So back in 1973, Professor Luis Basilio Rossi, who was a professor and labor activist in Brazil, was arrested by security forces who came to his house, and his wife, it's an incredible story, really. His wife, at the moment of his arrest, managed to write a note and drop it over the garden wall to her neighbor, to let the neighbor know what was happening. And the neighbor then passed the note to a priest, and the priest passed the note to the Archbishop of Sao Paulo. The message then got from the Archbishop to a Catholic university in Belgium, with a call to help, for help on behalf of Luis, who at this point was in prison and being tortured. And it just happened that some of the young students at the university in Belgium knew about Amnesty International and wrote a letter to the Amnesty offices, which at that time were in London. And the team there who worked on South America decided that they had to do something, and they had to do something urgently. But at that moment in time, 50 years ago, there was no campaign tool. Amnesty didn't have a campaign tool for taking action urgently. Also, this is in a totally different context to today, obviously, where everything was done, well, primarily with letters, writing letters. No email, no tweets, no Facebook. And so what they decided to do is to send out an appeal, a written appeal, to a network of organizations all around the world, so academics, trade unions, lawyers, journalists, explaining a brief snapshot of Luis's situation in Brazil, and asking them to write to the Brazilian authorities to release Luis. And it worked. Well, I say it worked. He wasn't immediately released, but so I can see Alec laughing. So the pressure grew. So hundreds of letters arrived in Brazil, and as May mentioned, this was a big surprise to the authorities, who weren't expecting this global outpouring of solidarity and action from people all across the world. And from that moment onwards, Luis was no longer tortured, and his prison conditions greatly improved. So that was just the start, and urgent actions have continued to this day. I don't know. I'd like to know how many urgent actions have been sent. I imagine it's easily tens of thousands, but I couldn't actually tell you,
แต่
unfortunately.
ไม่ได้มีตัวเลขเป๊ะๆนะฮะ
Yeah, that urgent action was
แต่ว่าตัว Urgent Action เนี่ยสำหรับอาจารย์หลุยส์ที่บราซิลก็เป็น Urgent Action ครั้งแรกนะฮะแล้วหลังจากนั้นนะก็คนทั่วโลกมีการร่วมมือนะฮะจากทั่วทุกมุมทั่วโลกเลย มันก็เป็นเรื่องราวที่เป็นเครื่องมือที่สามารถใช้ได้ทั่วโลกนะฮะในการรณรงค์ซึ่งสามารถนำไปสู่สามารถสร้างผลกระทบหรือว่า Impact ด้านสิทธิมนุษยชนนะฮะสำหรับคนที่กำลังเผชิญ อันตรายนะฮะหรือว่าเผชิญความอันตรายที่อาจจะถึงแก่ชีวิตหรือว่าถูกดำเนินคดีหรือว่าเผชิญความเสี่ยงต่อสุขภาพทุกประเด็นหลากหลายนะครับปัญหาหลากหลายมันก็ไม่มีข้อจำกัดนะฮะประเด็นเกี่ยวกับสิทธิมนุษยชนทั้งหลายเลยที่คนเหล่านั้นต้องเผชิญนะครับอยากจะให้ฉันเล่าให้ฟังไหมครับว่า urgent action คืออะไรแล้ว urgent action ทำงานยังไงครับ
And I guess we can take a glimpse on what is urgent
อาจจะเล่าให้ฟังสั้นๆนะ
and how to get that. I think we will push it to the second round.
Okay, cool. So yeah, the urgent action, how it works is as I've mentioned, it's an urgent thing. So as opposed to a case file, which we use for longer term campaigning on an individual, it's something that needs to happen right there because of imminent urgent need for that individual. And it starts in a regional office. So Amnesty is a huge, big organization, and we have regional offices in 5 regions of the world. And in each of these regional offices, we have what we call country teams. So a campaigner and a researcher who are dedicated to working on a particular country or region, and they are the experts. They know about the human rights issues in that area, and they have the connections with the individuals on the ground. And so they're the people who write the urgent actions. They identify the target, so which of government, for example, the authority, and the call to action. And then that all gets reviewed. It goes through a very strict reviewing policy, and then it comes to us. We check it, and law and policy, our legal team often will check it to make sure that it's all fine. And then it gets sent out to a network of approximately 500,000 people around the world. So for example, we'll send it to Amnesty Thailand and they'll disseminate to their network. Same for Amnesty USA, Amnesty Switzerland. It's really such a global thing. And then for each urgent action, you'll have thousands and thousands of people taking action, whether that's with tweets, we send out suggested messaging, emails, letters. Letters still are a thing today, 50 years on. And through this, we continue to see impacts. So just to give you an example, a really lovely story of Mamadou from the Ivory Coast. And Mamadou is living in Canada and has been for 6 years. He was a carer for elderly people during the COVID-19 pandemic, and he was at risk of being imminently deported. The authorities decided to deport him despite his asylum claim and despite him saying that there was a threat to his life. It was a proven threat to his life if he was to return to the Ivory Coast. So Amnesty mobilized, an urgent action was written calling on the authorities to halt the deportation. And in Canada alone, 11,000 people took action and thousands more around the world. And the government did halt his deportation. And this is just one example. There's so many other examples from around the world of where action from individuals is still working today. That was just last year, sorry, I should have said.
That was wonderful. So, yeah. So I guess, we could go to the success in the third round to see, what are the successes? Did you see, what's smile moment for you, like you feel like, this your all the work that you have done throughout the years and stuff, and this is what you see it, that, like the cast has been successful. Well, thank you so much, Emily, and I will get back to you when it comes to, like the how the go on a little bit on details on step and verifications again. Thank you. I want to move a little bit from a global perspective towards the Thailand. Like Emily said, it's been 50 years. I just want to hear as well, how long has Thailand been with the 50 years of the work and so far? And then, is there a little bit of history lesson for us of how was it there? Emily also said there was no emails. How did it work? How do we like sit together and write in the candles? And a little bit of the role and responsibility of those who now have been receiving massive email. How do you do filtrations and circulate forwards? So the floor is yours, for 10 minutes.
Okay, thank you. The urgent action process has existed for longer than Amnesty International Thailand. So I'm not exactly sure when Thailand first featured in an urgent action, but I know that after October the 6th, 1976, the Thai government received a lot of messages from Amnesty members around the world about what happened on that day and the people who were imprisoned afterwards, which was a shock to the Thai government at the time, who had never heard of Amnesty International and didn't expect this kind of response. It was also a shock to a number of the people who had been arrested, because they'd never heard of Amnesty International either, and they couldn't quite figure out who were all these foreigners who were pestering the Thai government to let them out of prison. Again, Amnesty must have done something when the refugees started coming over the border from Cambodia and Laos in later a couple of years after that. By this time, the Thai government seems to have figured out what they thought about Amnesty International, because I remember that the commander-in-chief of the Thai army at the time announced that if any member of Amnesty International ever tried to enter Thailand, he would have them arrested. And since I was an international member of Amnesty International at that time, and I was living in Thailand, well, I thought, he doesn't know me, I'll be all right, I'll be safe. My involvement in the urgent action campaigns began about 20 years ago, when Amnesty Thailand was still trying to form groups, which is where members come together, they form a group and they take on activities by themselves, often funded by themselves. And it's never really worked in Thailand, but we had a group because I was working for a foreign volunteer agency at the time. And of course, these foreign volunteers, many of them were already members of Amnesty in their own country. So they understood the game. So we formed a group and we started, we plugged into the urgent action system. What we could do was quite limited by the fact that we could get urgent actions by email. It could come in, but I couldn't send them to volunteers in Roy Et or so. The internet didn't get that far in those days. And the other problem we had was that sending most countries that were good at violating human rights at that time were not good at the internet. So the only thing you could do is send them a letter or a fax. Volunteers were being paid extremely little. So it wasn't reasonable to ask them to send a response to every urgent action. So we made a decision at that time that we would focus on urgent actions on cases in Southeast Asia, East Asia, South Asia, and the rest of the world, yeah, sorry, but we don't have the resources to deal with that. And our activity at that time was also involved with what was then called adoptions. You adopted a prisoner of conscience somewhere in the world, and our group had a Burmese student who was in jail in Myanmar, and so we would conduct actions on that case together with Amnesty International group in the Netherlands and elsewhere, and do the urgent action letters as they came in. So yeah, that's and the volunteers, of course, are only in Thailand for a limited period of time. They went home. The volunteer programs, in fact, all closed. So the Urgent Action Network was opened up to anybody who wanted to join. And I volunteered, stupid, 20 years ago to take the job of getting the urgent actions from London and disseminating them to the members of the network. And that's how it's operated ever since. And it's still limited to East, Southeast, and South Asia and the Pacific, which is something we should perhaps reconsider. So the old man has told you the history. There you go.
But I think it's a great history because, you know, a lot of time we were always questioning even the staff or everyone who, you know, we are trying to like, you want to sign petition, and it's like, would it work? And it's become very difficult for us to say, yeah, it should, but then we don't have any context on how, you know, how did it work at the end. And of course, you greatly mentioned about the 6th October. That was something that, you know, it kind of start a footstep of amnesty in Thailand. And without that, right, the work to see that, you know, the international pressures and global solidarity really do move us forward. So of course, there is a problem with the facts cost and actuality of getting it done and processed away. But I think it was the motivations of trying to get people together and the motivations of you know, trying to help what was urgent and to share with the circle. Okay, well, thank you so much, Kun Alex, and I think we will come back the second round on the differences right now. How do we do things? How does it work? I'll move along to, you know, we heard about people who are issued in the center, people who are the volunteers sending out to Thailand, and now it's the people who are receiving end of the cases and the work. And Rome was also the part of the urgent action while she was with her cases, many cases after she, you know, started her activism in the political rights and asking for justice for a lot of people. Second is she also is a case in Right for Right. She has received hopefully thousands of letters, a lot of rainbow drawing in her walls right now. So I guess in a way that, you know, do you think these kind of things still work in Thai society? You know, like it's kind of a foreign concept in a way, and it's a concept where why do you have to care about, you know, other people? Don't we have our own business to care? And what do you think, does it bring any positivity within the process of the receiving end, or like, you know, how do you feel about, you know, global solidarity? So Rung, the floor is yours for 10 minutes.
ค่ะก็สวัสดีนะคะแล้วก็ขอบคุณ Amnesty ที่
Hello
ชวน
everyone, thank you Amnesty International for inviting me to talk.
นักกิจกรรมนะคะที่เริ่มเคลื่อนไหวมาตั้งแต่ช่วงปี2563เนาะแล้วก็เคลื่อนไหวอย่างต่อเนื่องจนถึงปลายปี64ต้นปี65นะคะก็เป็นผู้ถูก ช่วยเหลือจาก Amnesty ละกันในทางของการที่ช่วยออกปฏิบัติการด่วนมาให้นะคะก็เคยไปยื่นหนังสือกับ Amnesty เนาะในช่วงปลายปี64ที่ณตอนนั้นเนี่ยมีเพื่อนๆถูกคุมขังอยู่ในเรือนจำนะคะเข้าใจว่ามีเพนกวินมีพี่ไผ่แล้วก็มีพี่อานนท์เนาะตอนนั้นเราก็ Amnesty รวบรวมได้ประมาณเกือบ 30,000 รายชื่อนะคะแล้วก็ไปยื่นที่หน้าทำเนียบรัฐบาลโดยที่คนที่มารับก็ไม่ได้เป็นตัวนายกเองนะคะแต่เป็นผู้แทนของมารับให้ซึ่งหลังจากนั้นเนี่ยในปฏิบัติการนี้เนี่ยการยื่นหนังสือมันเกิดขึ้นในเดือนพฤศจิกายนเนาะก็ใน 2-3 เดือนถัดจากนั้นนะคะทั้ง3คนเนี่ยก็ได้ถูกปล่อยตัวออกมาเราคิดว่าปฏิบัติการด่วนเนี่ยมันคือหนึ่งในปัจจัยสำคัญจริงๆค่ะที่ทำให้ข้อเรียกร้องเนี่ยในปฏิบัติการนั้นเนี่ยก็คือหยุดดำเนินคดีกับนักโทษทางความคิดเนาะแล้วก็ปล่อยตัวออกมาเนี่ยมันก็เกิดขึ้นได้จริงๆนะคะซึ่งเราคิดว่าผลลัพธ์ของมันก็เป็นได้ในหลายแง่อย่างแรกที่สำหรับเราที่เป็นนักกิจกรรมที่คิดว่าสำคัญที่สุดเลยเนี่ยคือขวัญกำลังใจของคนที่เคลื่อนไหวในด้านสิทธิมนุษยชนด้วยกันเนี่ยแหละค่ะมันเป็นความช่วยเหลือเป็นการส่งต่อพลังเนาะจากรายชื่อที่รวบรวมมา 28,000 กว่ารายชื่อเนี่ยเราคิดว่าคือเรามองว่ามันไม่ใช่เพียงแค่รายชื่อนะตอนนั้นมันเป็นความรู้สึกขึ้นมาจริงๆเลยอะค่ะว่ามันมีคนจำนวนนี้นะเยอะขนาดนี้ที่ช่วยกันซัพพอร์ตอะไรเงี้ยถ้าถามถึงในสถานการณ์ในประเทศไทยอะค่ะว่าการทำแบบนี้เนี่ยมันเวิร์กไหมลุงยังคิดว่ามันเวิร์กอยู่นะคะยังคิดว่ามันยังได้ผลลัพธ์ของมันอยู่ดังที่มันเกิดขึ้นไปแล้วเนี่ยอย่างที่ไอตัวที่ลุงไปยื่นมากับ Amnesty เนี่ยอันนั้นมันก็ผลลัพธ์มันก็เกิดขึ้นจริงๆก็คือเพื่อนเราได้ปล่อยตัวออกมาส่วนเราคิดว่าในปฏิบัติการหลายครั้งที่ผ่านมาเนี่ยถึงผลลัพธ์ของมันจะไม่ได้เกิดขึ้นแบบทันทีทันใดเลยนะตอนนี้ไปยื่นหนังสือปุ๊บได้ทันทีเลยแต่มันเป็นการสะสมไปเรื่อยๆอะค่ะเพราะว่าในการเรียกร้องแต่ละครั้งเนี่ยมันไม่ได้มีแค่กลุ่มใดกลุ่มเดียวเนาะหรือแบบว่าที่ออกมาเรียกร้องแต่มันเป็นหลายๆกลุ่มรวมกันเพราะงั้นเนี่ยทุกกลุ่มมันมีความจำเป็นมากที่ต้องสะสมแรงกดดันนั้นน่ะเพื่อที่พลังของเสียงของมวลชนของประชาชนนะคะที่รวบรวมมาได้จากหลายกลุ่ม Amnesty ด้วยเองก็ตามเนี่ยจะไปส่งความกดดันให้ผู้ที่มีอำนาจณตอนนั้นณตรงนั้นที่เกี่ยวกับเรื่องนั้นว่าคุณมันมีประชาชนประมาณจำนวนขนาดนี้เลยนะที่ไม่เห็นด้วยและต้องการเรียกร้องอะไรบางอย่างคือรัฐบาลหรือผู้มีอำนาจเนี่ยค่ะมันไม่สามารถเลยที่จะต้านทานกระแสของประชาชนได้เป็นเวลานานดังที่จะเห็นมาตั้งแต่ปี63เนี่ยลุงสังเกตว่ามันจะมีปรากฏการณ์แบบว่าเป็นคลื่นไปมันจะมีคลื่นที่พัดเข้ามาแล้วก็กลับลงไปเพราะเขาไม่สามารถทานกระแสสังคมได้นานขนาดนั้นมันก็เลยจะเกิดเหตุการณ์แบบนี้ขึ้นมันก็เลยเป็นความสำคัญอย่างมากย้อนกลับไปเป็นความสำคัญอย่างมากที่ปฏิบัติการเหล่านี้การกดดันพลังเหล่านี้จำเป็นที่จะต้องเกิดขึ้นและสะสมขึ้นไปเรื่อยๆลุงก็เลยมองว่ามันคือที่ผ่านมามันทำให้เห็นว่ามันเกิดขึ้นได้จริงๆถึงมันจะไม่ใช่ immediately นะแต่ว่าในการสะสมระยะยาวมันเกิดขึ้นแล้วก็เราคิดว่ามันยังส่งผลถึงตอนนี้เนี่ยที่กระแสในประเทศไทยกระแสกระแสการเคลื่อนไหวเนี่ยค่อนข้างดรอปลงแล้วเนี่ยแต่มันก็ไม่ได้ลุงคิดว่ามันไม่ได้สะท้านถึงว่าปฏิบัติการแบบนี้เนี่ยมันจะทำไม่ได้อีกแล้วมันไม่ใช่ลุงคิดว่ามันยังคงทำได้ต่อไปเรื่อยๆแล้วก็มันยังมีผลที่เกิดขึ้นจากปฏิบัติการเหล่านี้อยู่อะค่ะ
ค่ะขอบคุณมากค่ะลุง thank you so much ลุง for providing you know, what is accumulated pressures and collective pressures, the importance of, you know, the sending solidarities. And I think I think Rung really remind us as well, you know, because we did quite a bit of work on rallies and pressure the government to release those who just exercising freedom of expressions and freedom of assembly. And maybe not too long from that, these conditions and international pressures really kind of give the take. And also, just a short note, it also put Rung at stake as well, submitting the letter with us, in a way that now the government see, okay, Rung is a part of the global pressure, and that make her even more dangerous, just not in Thailand, but around the world, because she has her voices around. And I think having that volunteerism and to show that, you know, not just standing for your own cases, but just standing for other people who are still in prison is as important. And if there is need to be a global pressure, then it was a must. Okay, a first round has done, and I think that was, you know, we have a very a good insight of how things how urgent action has worked so far. The second round, I think we will talk a little bit more on the presence, on, you know, what and how urgent action is being used in Thailand now, what kind of tactics does it use, you know, and also really want to hear from people like, you know, how can we do it better, you know, from the next 50 years, how can we utilize this urgent action to continue, how should we do we need a better tweet, or, you know, what kind of pressure do we need from the government? So I really want to hear from you what you think, and what kind of tactic do you think it has been working and what hasn't been working. So you have around 5 to 7 minutes on this. Kunala, can you hear me?
Oh, yeah. Sorry,
Yes.
I was waiting for my picture to come up. Sorry. Yeah, I went back and looked at one of the very first urgent actions I received when I volunteered to be the coordinator. And it was a very simple document. The urgent actions today have much more information about the case, and also about the context, the human rights context and the country context of each case, which means that the urgent actions have used a lot more resources. Amnesty International has put a lot of resources into these, and therefore we should be thinking of how can we best exploit those resources. One thing that has changed, which I think is absolutely wonderful, is that urgent actions now contain a sample letter. Many of the people who sending urgent actions are not native speakers of English. Writing a letter in English or another language is very difficult for them, and therefore these sample letters will make it much easier for them to participate. The reason why I think that is wonderful is because I used to do this myself just for Amnesty International Thailand. Every time I got an urgent action, I would send the urgent action to the network. I would also send them a sample letter. I no longer have to do that. So thank you very much, Amnesty International. Of course, I think your letters could be improved, but never mind. We can work on that. The other thing that has changed, obviously, is the way that we can send urgent action appeals.
นะฮะในการส่งตัวจดหมายเนี่ยเคสส่วนใหญ่เลยก็ไม่ได้
Occasionally they have to, because somebody somewhere doesn't have an email. Fax machines don't exist anymore, as far as I know. So it's back to the post office. Even then, with COVID, I've discovered that for periods of time, you couldn't even send a letter to China. They were not accepting mail for reasons of COVID. So those urgent actions, unfortunately, we could not take any action, urgent or otherwise. The other thing that I've noticed, remember, we're only looking at urgent actions in this part of the world, South Asia, Southeast Asia, and East Asia. Now, I went back and checked 10 years ago, we were doing approximately 100 urgent action appeals a year. 2 years ago, it was about 50. Last year, it was about 30. I am not sure if this is true of all the urgent actions for the whole world. I think it is, but it means that the number of cases that we have to deal with is smaller, which is, I mean, I feel sorry for whoever is not an urgent action who would have been years ago, the victim, but it does mean that we can devote, if we're going to devote the same resources to urgent actions, we can do more with each case. And because we can do it through email or Twitter or some other social media platform, we can do it much more urgently than we could in the past. So if we talk about what we could be doing that we're not doing now, I think we could perhaps engage embassies a lot more than we do. We could go directly, and I think this is a function that is something the office, Amnesty International Thailand office, should be doing rather than the members of the network. I should make clear that the members of the Urgent Action Network for Amnesty International Thailand, half of them are not in Thailand and they're not Thais. They're old volunteers, basically. So I don't think it's any sense for somebody in Canada to be sending a message to an embassy in Bangkok. I think that is something we should be doing from here, and not just send them a letter, but send them a letter saying, come on, tell us what's going on. Respond to this case. In the past, we have managed to do that in a few cases, and we have, or I have, entered into a dialogue with these embassies. I've always kept the office informed, eventually, of what I'm doing, and that I think is a fruitful thing. Another thing we might be thinking of is that, I mean, I've often said that one of the real problems of urgent actions is that Thais don't seem to be very interested in foreign parts. You look at the foreign news in a Thai newspaper, it's a few columns. It's nothing like the foreign news in the Bangkok Post, which is it's more foreign news in the Bangkok Post than domestic news. Thais don't seem to be very interested in foreign parts and don't seem to know very much, and that makes it a bit difficult for them to get excited about somebody in Papua New Guinea who's been locked up for putting a flag up the flagpole. But I think we should work on that. We should make people in Thailand more interested, and the people who should be most interested are people in power. So I think that we should be perhaps engaging with the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, explaining to them that we are in Thailand and we have received information about this human rights violation case in, say, Indonesia. Could you bring it up at an ASEAN meeting? Or, could you do something to help this poor individual who has been dispossessed, his house has been burned down because he's the wrong religion or whatever? Parliament has committees dealing with foreign affairs. We could present information to them and ask them to consider doing something about it. Of course, you can't force Parliament to do anything, and after the next election, God knows what we'll have, but never mind. And another thing we might do is try and link, if we can, urgent action cases with things that appear in the news. I mean, I've never done this, and I'm not sure how well it's going to work, but for example, last December, we had an urgent action case that we took action on about a labor activist in Cambodia who went to a meeting in Australia, came back and got arrested for being a labor activist. At the same time, in the Bangkok Post, there was a story about Thais being rescued from a call center in Cambodia. And the focus of that story was, oh, these poor Thais, they have been exploited in Cambodia. I think we could have written a letter or even a column for the Bangkok Post pointing out that, yes, these poor Thais need to be rescued. That is wrong. But the Cambodian government does the same thing to its own citizens, for example, and then we give them the major points of the urgent action that we have received. Yeah, so I think that's ways that we could think of moving forward with the way to exploit this resource that the International Secretariat is giving us.
I think you put a really good point, because you know, like the strategies that we use, because things, you know, the technology has been helping us quite a lot more, but we haven't thought it through to how to catch the time. And, you know, back then urgent action might be a little bit too much to say urgent, because the technicality of the time, but now we have it. I think we should use it better and utilize it in different ways. Like you said, we barely engage with the local authority when it comes to foreign policy, and the same and we barely engage with very rarely engage with the MFA, Ministry of Foreign Affairs, when it comes to different countries matters. And it could very be a good entry point for the countries like Thailand to kind of reflect to themselves as well of, you know, what's happening around the world, utilize this information to have a better foreign policy. So I think you put a very great point on that. And I think the second thing that I thought it was that we could see and experience as well is amount of the attention when it comes to things are very far away. And I think that's something has been challenging for an urgent actions community in Thailand still. But I think you also put a good point, you know, it doesn't mean that we shouldn't do it. It means that we should be more creative. It means that we should put on a context, tag along what's happening, tag along something that people start to understand what's going on, what's happening in Malaysia, things that's happening, you know, across the nation, across the continent. And I think that's something that we have to invest on thinking a lot more than just, you know, using it as a tool, but it could be the project by itself. ขอบคุณคุณอเล็กซ์มากค่ะ and I think we definitely have to go and talk together on how to do things a little bit better. Second, I think now we were commenting on what's great and what should be improved. I think, Emily, before you get to a very detailed information, we now, you know, the Kunalek also mentioned, now we have a sample letter, and we also have a very detailed information, the background information for urgent action network to use and utilize. And I think it's really helpful for people who might not follow up with the news quite often as they do, to have a little bit of context in there. But yeah, to get all this information, you know, like you were saying about the you have to check with the team and verifications, and also you have to do with ethics and consents. Maybe if you could help me go through a little bit on details of how does it work, you know, when people in the prison, how do we get those information from, where, you know, because what's the challenge of having information out? What's the challenge of the consent, and do you working that to see that, you know, the ethics play, how ethics play a very important role when it comes to advocating for rights, that we are not violating other people's privacy rights as well. So I just want to hear from you, just 5 to 7 minutes on it.
Thanks, May. Yeah, so before I start, I just want to say that like personally, I'm a bit removed from the actual relationship with the individual who we're doing the urgent action for, because as I mentioned before, that's the campaigner and the researcher in the regional office who have that much closer relationship, and so they'd be the ones getting the information either from the individuals themselves, or perhaps where that's not possible, for example, if the individual is in prison, then they might speak to their lawyer or representative, and perhaps a family member, and they would then take that information from there to build the campaign. But where my team does come in, and we have a role in ensuring that all campaigning or all work across Amnesty with and for individuals at risk follows our enshrined principles of firstly informed consent and active participation. So this is really, really, really essential for all work that we do. Working on individuals at risk is
ความเสี่ยงเนี่ยก็เป็นส่วนที่สำคัญของงาน Amnesty นะฮะมันมีความสำคัญมากเลยค่ะเพราะว่าในแง่หนึ่งเนี่ยมันเป็นผลกระทบที่เกิดขึ้นต่อชีวิตของบุคคลนั้นๆนะฮะแต่ขณะในอีกด้านหนึ่งเนี่ยมันก็เป็นการทำให้ประเด็นที่เราทำนะครับมันประเด็นที่มันมีคนได้เห็นว่ามันมีหน้ามีตามีการใส่แง่มุมความเป็นมนุษย์ให้กับประเด็นที่เราทำงานนะฮะซึ่งเป็นสิ่งที่ทำให้คนเนี่ยมีความสนใจแล้วก็อินกับงานของ Amnesty เพราะฉะนั้นเราจึงต้องมีความระมัดระวังมากค่ะว่าข้อมูลต่างๆเนี่ยมันจะไม่ส่งผลหรือความเสียหายต่อบุคคลนั้นๆในแง่ของการได้รับการยินยอมอย่างมีข้อมูลเพียงพอนะฮะนี่ก็เป็นสิ่งที่นักวิจัยแล้วก็นักรณรงค์นะที่ทำงานกับบุคคลต่างๆเหล่านี้เนี่ยที่มีการเล่าเรื่องของบุคคลเหล่านี้นะฮะจำเป็นต้องปฏิบัติตามนะฮะแนวคิดของเราก็คือก่อนอื่นเราจำเป็นต้องมีความซื่อสัตย์แล้วก็มีความเปิดเผยต่องานเกี่ยวกับงานที่เราทำนะฮะแล้วก็พูดถึงผลกระทบที่อาจจะเกิดขึ้นต่อบุคคลต่างๆได้ยกตัวอย่างนะฮะก็คือสำหรับตัว Urgent Action เนี่ยเราก็จะมีการพูดคุยกับบุคคลหรือว่าตัวแทนของเขานะเกี่ยวกับความเสี่ยงที่อาจจะเกิดขึ้นนะฮะความเสี่ยงที่อาจจะเกิดขึ้นเราทำงานเพื่อที่จะสร้างความเปลี่ยนแปลงหรือว่าแต่ว่าขณะเดียวกันกิจกรรมดังกล่าวก็อาจจะสร้างผลกระทบที่เราไม่อยากให้เกิดขึ้นหรือว่าความเสี่ยงตอนนั้นเราก็ต้องมีการพูดถึงอย่างเปิดเผยนะคะแล้วก็รับประกันว่าคนเหล่านี้เนี่ยจะรับทราบถึงความเสี่ยงแล้วก็ให้ความยินยอมแล้วก็มีความเต็มใจให้เราทำกิจกรรมต่อนะคะแล้วก็ในส่วนสำคัญของหลักการในการให้ความยินยอมอย่างมีข้อมูลเพียงพอเนี่ยก็คือเราต้องให้เขาเป็นผู้ที่ตัดสินใจว่าอยากจะให้ทางเราเนี่ยมีการทำการรณรงค์มีการทำการแคมเปญอย่างไรนะครับเพราะฉะนั้นเราต้องให้คนเหล่านั้นเนี่ยเป็นส่วนหนึ่งของกระบวนการทำงานกระบวนการตัดสินใจนะฮะแล้วก็มีการอาจจะเป็นการพูดคุยเกี่ยวกับระยะเวลาในการทำกิจกรรมเพราะว่าเขาทราบเกี่ยวกับสถานการณ์ของตัวเองที่ดีที่สุดเขาเป็นคนที่ต้องบอกเรานะฮะว่าระยะเวลาใดหรือว่าทำอย่างไรครับตัดสินใจเกี่ยวกับกลุ่มเป้าหมายเกี่ยวกับข้อเรียกร้องนะฮะเกี่ยวกับกระบวนการทั้งหมดเราก็จะปฏิบัติต่อคนเหล่านี้นะฮะเป็นปัจเจกบุคคลเป็นมนุษย์คนหนึ่งเราไม่ได้ปฏิบัติต่อคนประกอบปัจเจกนะฮะบุคคลเหล่านี้เนี่ยเป็นเหมือนวัตถุนะฮะเราจะเรียกว่าเราทำแคมเปญกับ
so that leads on to active participation. So again, ensuring where possible the engagement of individuals in the campaigning that we do, and again making sure that they're part of every stage of the process and they're feeding in, we're listening, we're learning from them, and where that's not possible, for example, as I said earlier, if it's an individual in prison, for example, then we would make sure that we're actively engaging with their lawyer, with their family member, who can feed in at every point. So it's a collaborative thing. It's not just Amnesty very detached from the individual.
Thank you, Emily. I think it's very important to like you said, like informed consent and participations, because many times we we goes against the clock and we want to get things out, and we need to make sure that every steps along the way that we are working for them and working with them. So basically decision making, it's very important along the process. And I think you also rightly said that when cases are hard, like can share a little bit, but when those who are individuals who are still in prisons, it's a sections or campaigners, we try really hard to make sure that we have not just one-time relationship with them, but this relationship goes a long way from knowing each other, feel comfortable, and just for us not to cherry picking their situations, but in a way that we are, telling them that we are there for them. And if one day they don't feel that they want to be a part of it, they have the final say on that conversation as well. So I think that's, in a way that we always have to remind ourselves on that information, and really debating between, the crisis and actual informed consent. Because for me, there are many cases that we didn't push to be urgent action because the family feel that they give them more threats than what they wanted to be. And I think we also need to respect that decision as well, right? Okay, thank you so much, Emily. I think that's very, not just a urgent action, but it goes on the human rights work as a whole, on humanizing of the people, not just to put it as a legal context, but also bring faces, bring understanding, and bring the face and bring the conversation up. Bring it back to the person who have at the receiving end, maybe put in larger scope of the activism. When you take part in activisms and you become the leaders, you sometimes, do you feel, lonely? Do you feel that, a lot of decisions, and if you feel that you have the whole shoulder, your whole weight on your shoulders, that you want things to be better, and in the same time you are the first barriers when there is any charges come against, because you are the spotlight being put into you. So how for you, I wanted to hear from you that does it help to have somewhat, like the global solidarity that you were mentioned, or the solidarity as a whole, for you not to feel that the fight is not alone? Second, I think it's really good to hear from you as well that, how can we utilize this, this kind of activity further on, like you mentioned before, even though the mass protest is not there anymore, the charges is still there. There are people still facing dry hunger strikes, or there are, students 14 years old being charged with less than just. How can we push this forward, and how can we make it better? So I want to hear it from you as well.
ค่ะ คือใช่เหมือนที่พี่เมย์พูดเลยค่ะว่ามันเป็นความรู้สึกแบบแบกทั้งโลกไว้บนบ่านะคือด้วยความที่เราออกมาพูดเรื่องที่มันค่อนข้างเป็นประเด็นน่ากลัวนะเรียกว่าประเด็นน่ากลัวเลยก็ได้นะในสังคมไทยนะคะก็คือเรื่องสถาบันพระมหากษัตริย์มันทำให้ความสนใจของทั้งผู้คนแล้วก็สื่อมวลชนเนี่ยมันมาหนักที่เรามากๆมันคือบางครั้งมันหลายๆครั้งเลยดีกว่าค่ะมันก็รู้สึกว่าเราเหมือนกำลังทำอะไรคนเดียวเพราะมันโถมทุกอย่างมันโถมมาที่เราหมดเลยมันไม่ได้โถมไปที่ตัวกลุ่มองค์กรนะไม่ได้โถมไปที่แบบกระจายแบบไปเพื่อนๆเรารอบข้างมันไม่ใช่แต่มันโถมมาที่ตัวคนเดียวด้วยความที่มันก็ยังมีความแบบเวลาทำอะไรมันต้องมีตัวบุคคลที่เอาไว้ชูประเด็นบางอย่างอยู่เสมอซึ่งมันก็ยังเป็นอยู่จนถึงตอนนี้นะคะมันก็เลยสำหรับเราที่นึกย้อนไปถึงตอนนั้นนะว่าเรารู้สึกยังไงเนี่ย มันค่อนข้างเหมือนโลกมันมืด ยิ่งตอนเราถูกคุมขังอยู่ในเรือนจำลุงถูกคุมขังไป3 ครั้งอะค่ะทุกครั้งเนี่ยมันก็รู้สึกเหมือนว่า มันเหมือนมืด8 ด้านเนาะคือเราพูดไปแหละว่า เราต้องการเรียกร้องอะไร เรามีข้อเสนออะไร แต่ว่าเหมือนเราพูดกับกำแพงอะค่ะ เราก็พูดไปฝ่ายเดียว ฝ่ายรัฐเนี่ย ก็จะใช้วิธีแบบไม่สนใจ หรือที่แรงๆก็คือจับขังเลยจับขังนานๆก็มีจับขังเป็นปีก็มีมาแล้วนะคะ มันก็ยากที่เราจะทำอะไรด้วยตัวคนเดียว ซึ่งมันเป็นความจำเป็นเนาะว่าการต่อสู้ในแต่ละครั้งเนี่ยมันต้องมีเครือข่าย มันต้องมีแนวร่วมที่มากเพียงพอที่จะทำให้น้ำหนักในการเรียกร้องของเราเนี่ยมันหนักแน่นเพียงพอที่คนทั่วไปจะรับรู้และมีแนวโน้มที่จะมาเห็นด้วยกับพวกเราหรือแนวโน้มของรัฐเนี่ยที่จะรับฟังพวกเรามากขึ้น เพราะงั้นเนี่ยตอนที่มีปฏิบัติการอะไรแบบนี้ขึ้นมายื่นรายชื่อรวบรวมรายชื่อให้เราเรียกร้องอะไรให้พวกเราเนี่ยค่ะมันเป็นเหมือนมืออีกมือหนึ่งที่เข้ามาเนาะว่าแบบเอ้ยคุณยังมีคนซัพพอร์ตนะคุณไม่ได้สู้คนเดียวนะเว้ยคุณ มันยังมีคนจำนวนเนี้ยหลายคนมากเลยถึงเขาจะไม่ได้ออกมาร่วมกับคุณไม่ได้สะดวกออกมาเปิดหน้าเปิดตา แต่อย่างน้อยเขาร่วมลงชื่อกับคุณนะซึ่งมันช่วยเราได้เยอะทั้งในทางอย่างที่เราบอกไปตอนต้นทั้งในทางใจเอง แล้วก็ทั้งในการต่อสู้เองมันมีน้ำหนักของมันก็เลยมันช่วยได้มากจริงๆค่ะส่วนว่าเมื่อกี้แบบคุณอาเล็กพูดถึงว่าคนแบบว่าคนไทยไม่ค่อยสนใจแบบข่าวต่างประเทศเท่าไหร่เราก็เห็นด้วย แต่ถึงการนั้นเองข่าวในประเทศเองเนี่ยเราก็ไม่แน่ใจด้วยซ้ำค่ะว่าคนสนใจมากหรือเปล่ายิ่งเป็น ยิ่งเป็นแบบกรณีแบบเด็กทำอ่ะ นักศึกษาทำอ่ะ ช่วงแรกมันยากมากเลย มันยากมากเลยที่เฮ้ยมึงเป็นเด็กอ่ะใครไม่รู้อ่ะอย่างลุงอ่ะก็ไม่ได้มีใครรู้จักมาก่อนใช่ไหมคะจนไปพูด10 ข้อแบบอ๋อคนนี้มันพูด10 ข้อนี่หว่าถึงได้รู้ขึ้นมาว่า มันมีคนที่พูดอะไรอย่างนี้อยู่ไว้ยถึงแม้ว่าก่อนหน้าเนี้ยตั้งนานแล้ว การพูดถึงเรื่องสถาบันกษัตริย์หรือว่าเรื่องรัฐบาลอะไรที่มันประมาณเนี้ย เหมือนที่เราพูดเนี่ย มันถูกพูดมาตั้งนานแล้วแต่ว่ามันแค่ว่าความสนใจอ่ะมันน้อย ไม่ไม่แน่ใจเหมือนกันว่าเพราะอะไร แต่ในสมัยนี้เนี่ยมันก็เราคิดว่ามันอาจจะใกล้ๆจะย้อนกลับไปแล้วก็คือว่าอย่างที่เราเห็นนะคะม็อบของนักศึกษาเนี่ยที่อย่างที่ลุงมีส่วนร่วมแล้วก็ทำมาเนี่ย มันบูมได้แค่ปีเดียวเท่านั้นปีเดียวจบปีปุ๊บทุกอย่างเหมือนค่อยๆละลายไปหมายความว่าหมายถึงในส่วนของการเคลื่อนไหวและความสนใจที่มีให้เนี่ยมันค่อยๆหายลงไป แต่ก็ยังดี ยังมีส่วนที่ดีว่าโอเค ในส่วนของความคิดข้อเรียกร้องเนี่ยมันยังอยู่ในในในความคิดคนมันก็เลยคือส่วนใหญ่อะค่ะ กลุ่มเคลื่อนไหวมันไม่ค่อยทำงานเย็นกัน เราจะทำเป็นงานร้อน แต่ว่าพอมีเรื่องอะไรมาเราไป มันก็เลยจำเป็นก็ต้องขอบคุณ Amnesty นะเพราะว่ามันมีความจำเป็นอย่างมากต้องมีองค์กรแบบพวกคุณอะที่ทำงานเย็นด้วย แล้วก็ทำงานร้อนไปด้วยเพื่อช่วยเสริมกำลังให้คนที่กำลังเคลื่อนไหวเรื่องนี้ที่กำลังเรียกร้องเรื่องนี้ที่เป็นโอเคเราคิดเห็นเหมือนกันอะเรื่องสิทธิมนุษยชนการรักษาสิทธิการ freedom of speech อะไรอย่างเงี้ยค่ะมันก็ช่วยได้เยอะ แล้วก็ยังเห็นว่ามันยังไปต่อได้ถึงแม้ว่าโอเคอย่างที่บอกไปความสนใจมันน้อยลงเนาะแต่ว่าเราสำหรับลุงนะลุงคิดว่ามันคงดรอปได้แค่ช่วงหนึ่งเพราะว่าปัญหามันยังอยู่ เดี๋ยวกระแสความสนใจหรือว่าอะไรเดี๋ยวมันก็กลับมาใหม่ ในตอนที่ทุกคนเห็นว่าทุกคนเห็นว่าตัวเองอะเดือดร้อนเหมือนกันตอนนี้ทุกคนอาจจะไปสนใจเลือกตั้งถ้าในกรณีประเทศไทย
Thank you so much, Rung, for sharing. I think it's very important, like to share that those people who like human rights defenders, actors who are at the forefront of this of the human rights work and speaking out for what is injustice. They usually are the one who at risk. And not just that, those people who might not be in the spotlight, the news, those people are marginalized, indigenous groups, students, young people. It's really rare that what are they doing? It's in the mainstream news, and I think that's something that to keep us reminded that a very important part is to make sure that those people who are not being those people who continue working and facing charges and stuff is we have to take part into account a lot more. And the second thing I thought that I think it was very important is strategies. I think one good thing about the movement is, like Rule said, it comes and go. It has its wave, it has its time, and it's had to go back and rebuild itself. One thing Amnesty has, there is a strong need for strategies, and I think that's something that Amnesty, in a way that we talk so much about strategy, maybe even more than what we would like to. But I think this is just to make sure that the case, like the persistence and the continuity of the work and the development of the work doesn't get quiet. And we are exploring different alternatives, the tools and the tactics that we learn from different countries, that we learn from different from the history understanding that we could try and do this. Right now there might be less a prominent physical action from the government, but the court, the charge is still there. How can we make sure that the society continue be aware of what's going on and to make sure that we are highlighting not just in Thailand but around the world that even though there's no what's it called water gun, there's no rubber bullets on the streets, people still being charged, and the charge is severe, and the amount of charges that Rung might have to face is half a decade long of the imprisonment. So I think this is something that for us to continue strategizing to keep the conversation in the spots. And I think it's a big part for us to start working that what if things are quiet, things are difficult, how can we utilize, how can we strategize it better to continue communicating with people. All right, I think we have come to the end part of the last round. We have talked about challenges, the history, how is it being worked, what could be better. But I want to hear from you, kind of like if there's one case for you could think about, and your proud moment as being a long, Amnesty Thailand's been here 30 years, and you've been here 20 years of supporting it, and you are volunteers and this organization isn't individuals, it's the normal people taking part into if there's one happy moment for you and the case that you feel like, okay, this is a proud case that you've been working on, and to be a part of the larger release, or the detention has been gone now, what would it be, what would be yours, and to celebrate the 50th year today, and how do you want to see things further, and come to.
Thank you. If you're going to work on urgent actions, you have to be ready for months and months of work with no feedback. You really have no idea whether what you are doing is having an effect or not. And even if you find out through, normally Amnesty will tell you if there is a positive outcome. If somebody is released, you still don't know whether it was as a result of what you did, because other organizations are also working on the same cases. And you just have to believe that it helped, maybe just a little bit, but it helped. I've always thought a lot about what Anwar Ibrahim has said about this. Anwar Ibrahim is now the Prime Minister of Malaysia. He was previously a political prisoner in Malaysia. So he's received amnesty letters from both sides. He's received letters as a government official appealing against human rights violations by the government that he heads. He's also received letters as a prisoner expressing support for his case. And he says both kinds of letters work. I want to, the best example I have in my experience, we didn't really do anything about, because it was a Thai case. And at that time, Amnesty was saying, don't work on your own country. But it's the case of Jiranut Dio at Pracha Thai, who was prosecuted and found guilty under the Computer Crimes Act. And Amnesty decided this was a case where they would ask Amnesty members to send letters, not just to the Thai authorities, but also to the victim, to Diu herself. So I went into the Pracha Thai office one day, and on Diu's desk, there were about 30 or 40 letters. And she said, right, I'm glad you are here. Please read those letters for me. I know she's the manager, but why is she so lazy? And then I realized what had happened. Amnesty had asked members in Canada to send her letters. But Canada has two sections, Amnesty sections. One is English speaking and the other is French speaking. And Amnesty, being what it is, had asked the French speaking section to send letters to Diu. So all these letters were in a language that Diu could not understand. So I thought, okay, never mind. I'll take them home. I'll do a translation. I'll bring them back. So a couple of days later, I went back to the Pracha Thai office. I gave her the letters and she said, okay, good. You see those two bags, big bags on the floor? That's more. Brysony, the post office worker, was asking, what is going on? Why are you getting all these thousands and thousands of letters? So obviously I couldn't translate all, but I went through them. And I was in tears. A lot of the letters were from Amnesty youth groups. And the ones that really hit me were the ones by Amnesty, the ones that were signed with names like Mohammed, Fatima. These were obviously the children of immigrants, maybe refugees, asylum seekers, I don't know, into Quebec, who had written letters in very bad French to Diu saying things like, you are not alone. Oh, that was a good day. The problems that we have, the biggest one in my mind is language. The urgent actions can come in different languages, but one of them is not Thai. So if we want the majority of AI Thailand members to support it, somehow we've got to get over this language barrier. The language of the appeal, well, if we're going to send it overseas, then yes, we've got to think about putting it in an international language, but the urgent action has an example for that. But we could send letters in Thai to the embassy in Bangkok, if that's one of the targets, and we could overcome that that way. And the other thing I want to mention is this idea that Rung had talked about the our Thai background knowledge of what's going on in other countries is often quite limited. And I'll tell you, years and years and years ago, when I was back in England on a visit, I took the opportunity of visiting an Amnesty International group, a local group, who were dealing with a case, somewhere in Africa, I can't remember now what it was. And I went to this group and I thought, what the hell do these people know about Africa? They were teaching themselves. They had each taken an assignment. Somebody was going to talk about the political system in this country. somebody who's going to talk about the human rights situation in this country. They were teaching themselves about what is going on. That is what we have to do. The Thai education system isn't going to do it for you, even in the universities. We've got to start learning, teaching each other about what is going on in the rest of the world, specifically to do with human rights. Okay, I think that's all I want to say. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your kind words. You know, like I think that's the for case Pichu, I think it's something that I saw this pile as well, and she just like so much. But I think it's it was one of the rare cases where the domain owner of the website been charged for a committed crime, and the absurdity of it, and I think the push for her to say like she has to run her she has to manage the what's it called the Prasha Thai news already, and to say like there's so much work that she has to do, just knowing that little children or people from this other side of the world are supporting, and knowing what she has faced is not right. And I think that's reminding really give us a push to say that what you're doing is not wrong, and we stand with you. And I think you also really greatly put on the language barrier. I think we have to really do come together to find, because we have so much, we have a lot more resources. We have, I don't know, AIGP, I don't know what it is, what's the new things that's going on to help us with the language, and this shouldn't be a problem anymore, to make sure that we are able to communicate. And I think the last thing that Amnesty is trying to do is to work on human rights education, and I think there's no better education to share and learn about what's happening outside your own countries, and what's happening, and really try to motivate ourselves that things are not just around Lat Pral or in Bangkok, but it's a lot more going on. And for you to have a great awareness of what's going on in political systems, it gives you a wider perspective of how society operates as well. So thank you so much, Captain-elect. We'll move on a little bit. Now I'm just, bring a little bit of drama, like success cases, and maybe go back to Emily. I think you mentioned cover successful cases since the history until now. But I really want to hear from you, like as a personally, what case do you find was it makes a smile on your face, and to say at the end of the day, you like all the energy that you put, not knowing whether it was you or it was a success or not, and what was your case that you feel that you are proud of? And the second thing is how can we make sure that the UA grow in a strong grow stronger and continue being this global urgent pressures to other governments still violating to the individuals.
Thanks, May. So yeah, I mentioned one example earlier of an urgent action that Amnesty did last year for Mamadou, and yeah, I think that was Alec kind of mentioned that we do this stuff and we're internally optimistic because we first we hope for impact, and then we hope that the impact that does come about we've contributed to, but we don't always know that. But with the case of Mamadou, we had a fairly strong sense that change had come about because of the action taken as a result of the urgent action. And it is always nice when it's quite clear-cut sense that we've contributed to that, and assessments are obviously done by the teams to try and evaluate exactly what happened and what contribution we had, but it's not always clear. Another nice example from last year was that of an activist called Sultana in Western Sahara. And Sultana is an activist who defends the right to self-determination of her minority ethnic group. And she was being harassed by the authorities. It's a very sad situation, and was effectively under house arrest since de facto house arrest since November 2020, really suffering horrific abuse. Her and her sister, who were living in the house together, were trapped in the house together, were subject to harassment by by people who broke in, security forces, and they actually raped them, and it was a really horrific situation. Amnesty were mobilizing, you know, we did urgent actions, and just to say, you know, I think Rung mentioned something really important about, you know, the accumulative pressure. It's not just the one urgent action, you know, we continue to build on that. So, you know, for Sultana, we the first urgent action, and then another, and then another, and eventually the restrictions on her were eased, and she was able to leave her house and travel to Spain for medical attention. And in that case, kind of similar to the case of Mamadou, like we had a really strong sense that that was Amnesty's, you know, the activists causing, you know, a lot of pressure and global attention and visibility on her situation that led to her situation luckily changing. Yeah, and of course, as I've said, and as Alex said, we don't always know, but we do it anyway, because, you know, we have to be hopeful and optimistic that we will bring about change in such urgent and often horrible situations. And then in terms of continuing the urgent action and another 50 years, hopefully, I think there's different things we could do. The issue of language has come up a lot, and it's definitely something that we need to understand better and to build on. Unfortunately, of course, at the moment, the urgent action goes out in English, French, and Spanish. Well, not even necessarily the three languages, always English, and then often French and Spanish. And that suits the big national entities of Amnesty, you know, who work in those languages and take a lot of action, but that automatically discounts so many people. And I think especially that's an issue in the country where the human rights violation is taking place and the individual is living, you know, like Amnesty has a lot of international members, and we do work in countries all over the world, and the people living in that country can't take the action themselves because the urgent action is not in their language, and that's, you know, they're the people, if anyone, who's going to put pressure on, you know, their own government, for example. It's something that we really miss, and something that we should try to improve on. Yeah, I think another thing that was, again, only repeating, really building on what's already been said, is that we have to adapt to contexts in countries that, you know, using social media now, you know, that's been the way that we've started going, and suggesting tweets and stuff. But then, yeah, what's going to happen next? You know, we're not always going to be using Twitter or Facebook, you know, like learning from individual country situations and what works best there, and kind of constantly adjusting, I guess. I think the urgent action is quite formulaic, and that's worked, but, you know, we need to be a bit more agile, perhaps, going forwards.
Yes, thank you so much, Emily. The cases and stuff, like you said, you know, it's good for us to be able to measure, you know, okay, this is a success. But like I said, I think both of you give a very important messages, like, believe in it, believe that the continual work of solidarities and the hope, taking us even as small as micro, like in molecule levels of the part of the globe, of the accumulated pressure. One day, it's better than not. I think the question is now, like, what if it didn't happen? It's okay, and it has a little impact, or maybe not now, but within time. I think it kind of shows as well. And at the same time in Thailand, it takes some time for not just the member, for us to like, okay, put ourselves like, okay, we just need to believe that our staff don't go on the street and getting petition signed, explaining, repeating herself day in and day out of why signing this petition is important, and I kind of tell it the meaning of it, and it's also great to hear from those people who are out of the prisons. And I think last year it shows quite a prominent evidence that a lot of people has received letters in the prison, that we have our own a little bit of urgent action or letter writings work, and many people has mentioned it to our team that being prison is a very lonesome situations sometimes, especially during COVID time. It's very difficult to meet your family, the loved ones, and they have to use line application to talk to one each other, and the internet is not good. Letter might be the only thing that they keep them alive and continue the day, that they know that they are people outside supporting them. And I think that's something that we are continuing trying to make sure that we each other not leaving people behind and forgotten in the prisons. And I think sometimes we if we're lucky, we will receive letter from them, from the prisons as well, to say that they are continuing fighting, and they're thankful for a lot of Amnesty members around the world who still continue thinking about them. But it's not an easy case to get a letter in or to get a letter out, and I think that's another issue that we have to kind of fix it again as well. But yeah, last person before we end up with a little bit of what's happening in Sri Lanka and in South Asia, it's Rung. Rung, as Kun Alec mentioned, that the letters could come from both sides, being the one who the government yourself and the one who being present. I think Thailand, we have a similar case. One of the politicians who are so-called yellow shirt, ex-yellow shirt, ex-red shirt, were in prisons during the military coup, and I think we also created urgent action. So in the same times that right now we also call he is now the the assistant or spokesperson for the prime minister, and we are of course calling him to stop the conductions of the act of violations. But for Rung, you're the one who are submitting the letter yourself to the government, and at the same time receiving thousands and thousands of letters. It sounds a bit cliche to to say like, oh, the letters give me morals, that the letters is it's nice to receive them. Like how is it for you? And what is your smile moment with those letters, and to push us forwards to continue the urgent actions of sending letter to the government and to those who feel alone, or those who are sometimes questioning the movement, questioning themselves towards the movements of asking as a human rights defenders. How is it for you, and the importance of solidarities and the faith, or so-called the belief of being a part of something bigger? So yeah.
ค่ะ เรื่อง Right for Right นี่เป็นเรื่องที่หนูชอบพูดมากที่สุด เพราะว่ามันเป็นเอาจริงๆนะมันเป็นความทรงจำที่ดีที่สุดตั้งแต่ถูกคุมขังมา เดี๋ยวให้ดูนิดนึงอันนี้คือข้างโต๊ะลุงเราแปะไว้เอาบางส่วนมาแปะไว้แล้วก็ไอ้ที่เหลือลุงเอาตู้มาซื้อตู้มาแล้วก็เก็บไว้โดยเฉพาะ จดหมายอ่ะมันลุงเคยพูดไว้ว่ามันเหมือนเป็นสิ่งเดียวที่สามารถข้ามกำแพงคุกไปได้อย่างลุงตอนอยู่ในคุก3 รอบเนี่ยเราเจอพ่อแม่พี่สาวเนี่ยแค่ตอนที่อยู่ในศาลนะลุงไม่เคยได้เยี่ยมลุงเคยได้เยี่ยมครั้งอะไรแค่ครั้งเดียวตลอดการถูกคุมขังที่ผ่านมาแค่ครั้งเดียวเพราะว่าเข้าไปตอนโควิดพอดีแล้วระบบการจัดการในนั้นก็พูดตรงๆว่าห่วยมากคือแบบว่าระดับนักศึกษาปตรียังคิดได้ว่าควรแก้ปัญหายังไงแต่เขาไม่รู้ว่าคิดไม่ได้หรือว่าไม่มีงบจะทำนะคะมันก็ไม่แน่ใจเหมือนกันมันทำให้แบบว่าคือเมื่อเทียบกันอะระหว่างนักโทษทางความคิดนักโทษทางการเมืองเนี่ยกับนักโทษทั่วไปเนี่ยพอมองดูแล้วมันเศร้ามากคือนักโทษทางความคิดเนี่ยอย่างน้อยเนี่ยเขายังมีคนที่ถูกที่คิดถึงเขาแต่ว่านักโทษอื่นทั่วไปเขาไม่มีใครมันเป็นจุดเอาจริงๆมันเป็นเรื่องที่ทิกเกอร์ลุงพอสมควรเวลาพูดถึงเรื่องนี้มันเศร้าคือการทำแบบของแอมเนสตี้มันก็จะมีไอ้ที่ให้เขียนจดหมายใช่ไหมถึงแต่ละคนตอนที่อยู่ในคุกนะตอนนั้นน่ะลุงชอบมากเลยนะเพราะมันเป็นเรื่องเดียวอะที่คนในคุกอยากได้โอ๊ยพูดเลยจะร้องไห้อีกแล้วแต่ว่ามันเป็นเรื่องเดียวที่คนที่อยู่ในคุกตอนนั้นน่ะต้องการมากเลยเพราะว่าวันๆน่ะเราจะได้คุยกับทนายแค่มากสุดนะมากสุดคือ3 ชั่วโมงที่ทำได้แต่ปกติไม่มีใครทำได้หรอกค่ะบางคนอาจจะได้แค่20 นาทีด้วยซ้ำแล้วนอกจากนั้นเนี่ยมันก็จะไม่มีอะไรเลยคือในคุกมันไม่มีอะไรเลยคุกชายอาจจะมีข่าวให้ดูบ้างแต่คุกหญิงเนี่ยไม่มีเราไม่รู้ไม่รู้เลยว่าโลกข้างนอกเป็นยังไงมีใครกำลังทำอะไรอยู่บ้างไหมมีใครคนยังคิดถึงเราอยู่หรือเปล่าคนลืมเราไปหรือยังอันเนี้ยการถูกลืมมันคือสิ่งที่น่ากลัวมากตอนที่อยู่ในคุกเพราะเรากลัวด้วยแหละกลัวว่าจะถูกขังลืมกลัวว่าจะไม่ได้ออกไปเจอใครอีกแล้วกลัวว่าเพื่อนๆที่ต่อสู้มากับเราเนี่ยเขาจะทิ้งเราไปมันมีความกลัวแบบเนี้ยความกลัวแบบว่าที่มันฟุ้งซ่านที่มันคิดมากเกิดขึ้นในหัวเลยเพราะในคุกเนี่ยมันไม่เวลามันเยอะมากค่ะเยอะมากพอที่คนจะคิดฟุ้งซ่านจนแบบว่าเครียดมากเศร้ามากหรือมีอาการทางจิตได้มันเป็นได้จริงๆอะไรเงี้ยเพราะงั้นไอ้เรื่องจดหมายเนี่ยมันช่วยเยียวยาจิตใจที่สำคัญที่สุดเลยนะมันช่วยเยียวยาจิตใจทำให้เราไม่เศร้ามากเกินไปนักเราไม่คิดมากเกินไปนักเพราะเราจะพอรู้บ้างจากเนื้อหาในจดหมายใช่ไหมคะเวลาคนเขียนอะไรมาเขาไม่ได้เขียนแค่ว่าคิดถึงเขาบางหลายๆคนเล่าให้ฟังด้วยว่าเนี่ยตอนนี้ข้างนอกเป็นยังไงเขาทำอะไรกันอยู่มันยังมีการเรียกร้องอยู่นะคนไม่ได้ลืมหนูนะอะไรอย่างเงี้ยมันสำคัญมากจริงๆแบบเวลาเราพูดถึงเรื่องนี้เราก็จะพูดกับเพื่อนที่เคยเข้าคุกมาด้วยกันเนี่ยค่ะว่าจดหมายได้มาเท่าไหร่ล่ะใครส่งมาให้บ้างใครเขียนมาว่ายังไงอย่างตอนลุงไปโดนขังอยู่กับเบนจาเนี่ยตอนนั้นลุงไม่ได้จดหมายเพราะลุงเข้าไปแป๊บเดียวมันไม่ทันกันแต่ลุงก็จะแบบเบนจาได้จดหมายมาเยอะเปล่ามีอะไรบ้างใครเขียนอะไรมาให้บ้างมันก็จะเป็นเรื่องแบบว่าความสุขเล็กๆของคนในนั้นมันสำคัญมากจริงๆคือแบบถ้าไม่มีอ่ะเราไม่รู้เหมือนกันนะเราไม่รู้เหมือนกันนะว่าพอออกมาแล้วเราจะแบบว่ามันถ้าพูดภาษาไทยก็คือประสาทมากแค่ไหนอะค่ะมันช่วยเรื่องนี้
ค่ะขอบคุณลุงมาก thank you Rung so much for sharing the story really much like to always it's very grateful to hear your stories and and I think it's kind of give us a little bit of spiritual push to say, like what's happening inside, and a small words, it really changed life. It changed life with a lot of people who knows that the work is still important and not being forgotten. Just to know what is what's happening in the outside world. And so I think just to selling a little bit of what Amnesty doing, I think we still continue this project for anyone in the Rasodon cases, in like especially in Thai, that we are still trying to have this online form where we print it out and we'll submit it to the prisons, and we will continue doing that, and no matter how many people left during the process, 3, 4, 15, I think that's something that we have committed ourselves to, hearing from you, that we will continue doing the work. And I think letter writings and writing to those who are human defenders, activists, or individuals who are in prison is very important. So thank you so much for three of you, like Emily's and Rung, to share the stories of urgent actions. Before we end, we have Smriti Singh, who been here with us throughout the conversations, listening to the work of urgent actions, a little bit of Thailand history lessons of urgent actions, and I think we end in a good note of like why we need to continue doing that. So, and I think I want to hear we would love to learn a bit more. I think that's the regional context, the global context is so important. So we want to hear from you or what's happening in South Asia, especially with the protests, and I'm sure there's a lot of activists who coming out and talk about what's happening and exercising their right to freedom of expression, assembly, and associations. And if you could also touch a bit on the need for regional and global solidarity through different forms of actions.
Thank you, May, and thank you everyone for giving me the opportunity to be here. I'm just so glad that I joined this conversation from the beginning, because while I've worked in Amnesty in different capacities, but just to know the history of how this action that we now just it's become a tool for us. Instantly you go and think about this needs to be done, and we don't really go back and see where it came from, what was the rationale of it. And then just to know and hear from Alec, hear from Rung, hearing from Emily, it's just so good to know where we have come from. So thank you for having this conversation. I'm so glad that I joined. When I was listening to different experiences, and we always talk about how different our contexts are. Most of the times when we are talking about South Asia and Southeast Asia, they're seen as completely different contexts. But hearing all the stories that you discussed today and the examples, I think it's all the same. It's exactly the same. The sentiments, the actions, the way the governments behave is so similar, and there is just so much rich information and knowledge that exists with each regional office and with each section of Amnesty, that it's really important when we talk about moving forward. How do we move forward with urgent actions? How do we make these actions more stronger? I think one of the things is just to have a very regular knowledge exchange, to have these exchanges where we can talk about our own challenges, you can talk about your own challenges, and exchange those notes to know how different governments are thinking. That's, at least in South Asia, this is the pattern that we have seen, where each government is learning from the other. So they create a handbook of repression, which then the neighboring country takes and turns it into its own law. And so why shouldn't we as Amnesty, which is a movement, we do it together and learn and create those handbooks where we have experiences. Having said that, I will quickly take everyone through what we have been doing in South Asia with respect to Protect the Protest and how urgent actions come into play. So yes, while it so happened that we started, the global movement started Protect the Protest campaign just when Sri Lanka found itself in the worst situation possible. So since last year, now it'll be a year, Sri Lanka's saw the worst economic crisis that it has ever faced since, in his post-colonial history. And due to this economic crisis, which has really pushed the country back many decades, a host of these people-led movement and protests started in March. So in fact, we are kind of leading up to the 1 year of protests in Sri Lanka. And the simple demand was that they wanted the government to be thrown out. They wanted some constitutional amendments, which would lead to basic changes in the governance system, which is really required for the country to come out. And these protests, interestingly, was something which was very organic, because economic issues is something that touches upon everyone. Sri Lanka, just to give a historical context, it's a very divided society. Disparity is quite huge. You have like the really rich, and then you have people on the margins. So this was one binding factor which got people from all over the country, all walks of life, to come together and start protesting. As we know, what happens when people start protest is the government starts cracking down on them. So initially the protests, which were extremely peaceful, and they remained peaceful throughout the 1 year, the government started cracking down on protesters. Of course, when people-led movements happen, you also, the public leaders emerge, young leaders emerge out of those protests. So this is exactly what happened. There were student-led protests that started happening, and the government started arresting these protesters. Initially, the arrests were on ordinary laws. You get detained and then you get left off. But the South Asia, and this is not just Sri Lanka, in South Asia, there is this tendency of governments to use counterterrorism laws against any person who's exercising their right to freedom of expression or peaceful assembly. So in
ชุม
Sri
นุม
Lanka,
อย่างสันติเนี่ยก็จะใช้กฎหมายฉบับนี้ ซึ่งและในศรีลังกาก็มีกฎหมายละเมิดสิทธิ์ฉบับหนึ่งที่เรียกว่ากฎหมายต่อต้านการก่อการร้ายนะที่ให้อำนาจรัฐบาลในการคุมขังประชาชนได้นานถึงปีหนึ่งโดยไม่มีการตั้งข้อหานะครับซึ่งมันก็กฎหมายนี้ก็เปิดโอกาสให้มีการละเมิดแล้วก็มีการไม่ใช้กระบวนการทางกฎหมายที่ชอบธรรมนะฮะที่น่าสนใจก็คือตรงอันนี้ก็เป็นจุดเมื่อปีที่แล้วนะฮะเราอาจจะมีการทำ urgent action นะครับกับผู้ชุมนุมที่ถูกจับกุมนะฮะโดยก็เดี๋ยวเขาจะเล่าเรื่องข่าวดีให้ฟังก่อนนะฮะก่อนอย่างที่คุณอเล็กพูดนะครับ urgent action ก็ไม่รู้ว่ามันเป็นความสำเร็จที่เกิดจาก urgent action หรือเกิดจากความพยายามร่วมมือแน่นอนว่าเราไม่ทราบอย่างชัดเจนนะครับเราไม่ได้มีวิธีในการประเมินวัดผลแต่ urgent action เนี่ยก็เป็นหนึ่งในส่วนประกอบหนึ่งในเครื่องมือที่ช่วยให้เราไปเชื่อมโยงกับเป้าหมายของเรานะฮะแล้วก็ในการทำงานกับ urgent action เนี่ยมันก็มีแคมเปญอื่นๆด้วยที่เรามีการทำนะครับไม่ว่าจะเป็นการแคมเปญกิจกรรมการรณรงค์นะครับการพูดคุยกับภาคประชาสังคมอื่นๆโดยใช้แพลตฟอร์มที่เราสามารถใช้ได้นะซึ่งในทั้งหมดเนี่ยเราใช้ urgent action เป็นศูนย์กลางของกิจกรรมต่างๆของเรานะฮะแล้วก็เป็นวิธีในการสร้างความกดดันแล้วก็ก็มีผู้สนับสนุนในการเขียนจดหมายแล้วก็ส่งให้รัฐบาลแล้วก็รวมถึงผู้มีส่วนได้ส่วนเสียอื่นด้วยรวมถึงผู้ชุมชนระหว่างประเทศหรือองค์กรระหว่างประเทศต่างๆนะฮะแล้วก็ก็ภายใน2-3หลังนอกจากตัวแคมเปญ Protect the Protest แล้วเนี่ย Urgent Action เป็นเครื่องมือในการพูดคุยเกี่ยวกับประเด็นด้านเสรีภาพในการแสดงออกเสรีภาพในการชุมนุมแล้วก็สิทธิเสรีภาพด้านพลเมืองและการเมืองอื่นๆนะฮะก็เป็นเครื่องมือที่มีทรงพลังนะ แล้วก็นอกจากเรื่องสิทธิทางการเมืองและทางพลเมืองแล้วเนี่ยเรายังมีการทดลองใช้การใช้ urgent action ในประเด็นอื่นๆด้วยไม่ว่าจะเป็นสิทธิสังคมสิทธิทางสังคมหรือประเด็นเกี่ยวกับด้านการเปลี่ยนแปลงทางสภาพภูมิอากาศนะฮะในปีที่แล้วคิดว่าน่าจะปีที่แล้วนะปี 2021 นะฮะที่ในช่วงพีคของโควิดเลยที่ประเทศซีกโลกเหนือกำลังจะซีกโลกเหนือเนี่ยกำลังจะหายจากโควิดแต่ว่าทางซีกโลกใต้เนี่ยยังคงต่อสู้ในการแย่งวัคซีนหรือว่าในการได้รับวัคซีนในการฉีดวัคซีนให้ประชาชนอยู่ในประเทศเนปาลนะครับมีคน 1.3 ล้านคนเนี่ยในประเทศเนปาลนะที่ได้วัคซีน1 เข็มวัคซีนโควิด1 เข็มนะแต่ว่าไม่ได้วัคซีนตอนที่เราเขียนรายงานเกี่ยวกับประเด็นนี้เราก็ตระหนักว่าอันนี้เป็นสิ่งที่มีประเด็นที่มีความสำคัญนะซึ่งถึงแม้ว่าตัว urgent action เนี่ยมันส่วนใหญ่เป็นเครื่องมือที่ใช้สำหรับปัจเจกบุคคลแต่ว่าเราทำการตัดสินใจหลังจากที่มีการพูดคุยกันปรึกษาหารือกันมากมายนะครับว่าเราจะมีการทำ urgent action สำหรับประชากร 1.3 ล้านคนที่มีความเร่งด่วนที่จำเป็นต้องได้รับวัคซีนอย่างเร่งด่วนนะเข็มที่ 2
donate some vaccines to Nepal, and at the same time, their bilateral relations go way back.
ความสัมพันธ์แบบทวิภาคีของประเทศเนปาลกับประเทศก็เราเป้าหมายก็คือเป็นประเทศเนปาลกับประเทศที่เป็นเจ้าอาณานิคมของเนปาลก่อนนะแล้วมีการรวบรวมรายชื่อแล้วใช้ urgent action แล้วก็เป็นเคสที่ประสบความสำเร็จด้วยนะฮะเพราะว่าหลังจากนั้นเนี่ยก็มีหลายประเทศที่เข้ามามีส่วนร่วมนะญี่ปุ่นสหรัฐอเมริกาต่างๆก็ได้มีการยื่นวัคซีนนะครับส่งมอบวัคซีนให้กับประเทศเนปาลเพื่อให้คนประชากรจะเป็นล้านคนในเนปาลได้รับการฉีดวัคซีนนะก็จะพูดถึงเรื่องการสำรวจวิธีใหม่ๆในการแก้ไขความท้าทายที่คุณอเล็กพูดถึงนะฮะหนึ่งในความท้าทายในเอเชียใต้เนี่ยอย่างเช่นในประเทศศรีลังกาเนี่ยที่มันมีการขาดการเข้าถึงปัญหาในการใช้อีเมลนะบางทีเราถึงแม้ว่าเราจะมีอีเมลบางทีเราส่งไปที่อีเมลนั้นเราก็อีเมลมันก็จะเด้งกลับมานะเราจึงมีปัญหาในการหาวิธีในการรับประกันว่าจดหมายเหล่านี้เนี่ยจะได้ส่งไปถึงผู้รับที่เราต้องการนะครับเราก็มีความท้าทายในแง่ของในบริบทของเอเชียใต้นะก็ไม่ได้เช็คเทคโนโลยีกันมากนะเพราะฉะนั้นเราจึงมีการใช้Twitter นะครับก็อย่างรัฐบาลในอินเดียหรือศรีลังกาเนี่ยเขาก็มีแคร์ภาพลักษณ์ระหว่างประเทศนะครับเพราะฉะนั้นเราอาจจะใช้แพลตฟอร์มที่เป็น Twitter มากกว่าอีเมลนะครับเพราะว่า Twitter เนี่ยมันอาจจะเป็นการไปอยู่ในพื้นที่สาธารณะมากกว่านะฮะเราอาจจะเลยมีการใช้ Twitter หรือการทวีตตัว urgent action นะฮะแต่ในด้านเนื้อหาเนี่ยเราก็มีความสำคัญที่เราจำเป็นต้องมีเนื้อหาที่มีคุณภาพนะฮะโดยในการนำไปทวีตแล้วก็หาวิธีใหม่ๆในการใช้ Google ในurgent action แล้วก็เลยนาทีนะครับวิธีสุดท้ายก็จะพูดถึงเรื่องเกี่ยวกับปัญหาด้านภาษานะนี่ก็เป็นความสำคัญเช่นเดียวกันที่เราต้องมาคิดเกี่ยวกับการแปลนะครับการแปล urgent action แล้วก็เริ่มพูดคุยเกี่ยวกับการทำแคมเปญการรณรงค์เกี่ยวกับสื่อเกี่ยวกับตัว urgent action เพราะส่วนใหญ่ตัว urgent action ไม่ได้ถูกนำไปแปลเป็นตัวข่าวประชาสัมพันธ์สื่อนะแต่พูดคุยถึงการทำงานสื่อกับตัว urgent action นะเพื่อให้คนในวงกว้างทราบเพื่อให้คนมีการรับรู้เกี่ยวกับการละเมิดสิทธิ์หรือว่าความสำหรับคนที่ ไม่ได้เป็นสมาชิกหรืออาสาสมัครของ Amnesty หรือคนที่ไม่รู้จัก Amnesty เนี่ยให้คนกลุ่มนี้เนี่ยเข้าใจประเด็นและปัญหาสถานการณ์ที่เกิดขึ้นด้วยเพราะฉะนั้นอาจจะมีการกิจกรรมในการประชาสัมพันธ์กิจกรรมเกี่ยวกับสื่อนะครับเพื่อที่จะประชาสัมพันธ์ตัวgeneration ของเรานะครับ ก็ถ้าเกิดใครสนใจก็สามารถแชร์ทรัพยากรหรือว่าเอกสารต่างๆที่เราได้มีการผลิตขึ้นมาเกี่ยวกับตัว Generation นะก็ขอบคุณคุณสำริดมากเลยครับก็ที่ได้พูดถึงประเด็นที่สำคัญมากถึงแม้ว่าตัวบริบทที่แตกต่างกันภูมิภาคแตกต่างกันเนี่ยแต่หรือว่าการนำ Generation ไปใช้ในบริบทอื่นๆไม่ว่าจะเป็นสิทธิอื่นๆที่เป็นสิทธิด้านสังคมและวัฒนธรรม
towards individual dissidents or human defenders, it's still prominent. And thank you for sharing, a small success. We can't fully claim about what's happening, but I think it's good to hear that there are, two more people outside the prisons, and I think that's to keep us going. That that they're no longer being forgotten there. And the urgent actions, I think it is good for us to a good time for us to talk, reconsider what can we do better with the urgent actions, and because we know by heart that we're so hopeful for a better world, and we still believe that those people who are still facing will not be alone. And I think I think a couple of words I think is very important in this session is the humanizations of the people and the collective pressure that we are getting, and the strategies that we are providing a long term, the persistence and then continuities of the different ways that we're trying to push forwards, and hopefully when we grow bigger and we grow more, those increase the pressures and not forgetting people along the way, but we bring everyone together as a whole. But yeah, we have quite a bit of time, tiny bit of time of Q&A. So I just wonder, does anyone has questions? They want to raise a hand, or if not, I think Pigam shared to me that there are a couple of questions that I can answer. Okay. There's one person's who want to ask the questions when it comes to so yes, maybe quickly state your name, the language that you like to speak, and in the same times asking that question rather than a statement. Let's see. I think that person. Yes, hi.
Hi. Do you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you well.
Clearly. Okay, so I have some questions. Like after I joined this webinar, first of all, thank you for you guys that arranged this webinar. So I have some questions that would you like me to ask in Thai or in English? Okay.
Any language is fine.
Okay, so I have some questions. Okay, so I would like to ask that คืออยากรู้ว่าแบบเรามีวิธีการยังไงที่ทำให้แบบว่าคนไทยเชื่อในพลังของ UA อะคะหรือว่าเชื่อในพลังของ Urgent Action เพราะว่าเท่าที่แบบเจอหรือว่าเท่าที่ฟังมาอะไรอย่างเงี้ยค่ะคือยังมองว่าแบบจะทำยังไงให้คนไทยเชื่อในพลังของ UA แล้วก็แบบทำยังไงให้คนไทยเชื่อว่าสิ่งนี้มันมี impact แบบจริงๆมันไม่ใช่แค่การลงชื่อหรือว่าแบบเราทำยังไงให้คนไทยได้เข้าใจในประเด็นนี้มากขึ้นอะไรอย่างเงี้ยค่ะมีวิธีการทำยังไงให้แบบให้ประเด็นนี้เป็นแบบให้คนไทยเชื่อใน impact ของ UA จริงๆค่ะประมาณนี้ค่ะพี่เมย์ขอบคุณค่ะ
Yes. So yeah, what are, I think that the question was what are other ways can we do better? I think Smriti, if you're there as well, you can help me with that, or Emily, like if you have any ideas of how can we extend the spreading more. information to or disseminate information around.
Sorry, Emily, do you want to come in first?
I could just say something very briefly. I'm sure you have more to say because you have a better idea. But I think one thing Amnesty could certainly do is be better at telling the success stories. You know, my team have put together a whole long list of all the successes for our work with and for individuals at risk from 2022. But then it stops there. It's in a document, but we need to make that information more accessible. Maybe videos, you know, seem to be the thing that work best for sharing successes, that things that can go out on social media very quick, you know, engaging stories. You know, if people can't see the impact that it has on the individuals that we work with, then, you know, why would they take the action that we're asking them to take? That's just one thing. I'm sure there's more.
Thank you, Emily. Smriti?
Thanks, May. No, I agree, and my point was on the lines of what Emily said. I think in Amnesty we have the tendency to move from one case to another. You know, one is done, so we'll move on to the other problem that is coming. When we talk about humanizing the cases, when we are talking about the voices of the people, when we are talking about the celebration of these cases, I think it's very important to have the celebration from the people who have come out. So yes, we do you know, close the UA, we send a success story, but where are the voices of the people who have come out? And are we providing spaces? Is Amnesty taking a step forward? Are we taking a step forward to bring those people back and share their own experiences? What Room shared about, you know, the experience, it was exactly word to word, I can say, was the experience that one of our UA person had when he was in jail. It was that solidarity that he got was the thing that he said kept him moving throughout and kept him, let him persevere through whatever was happening. And I think these are really important stories for people who are taking action to know where the change has happened. Whether or not it was just their action, but as an individual, if I am doing something, I need the outcome, because we psychologically, we think like that. The second thing is also, which it right before I'd said, it's about also the understanding of people. How much do they understand about the gravity of the situation? So when we are talking about an individual at risk, I think it's also important to also at some point talk about the larger issue that exists. Because if we don't target the larger issue while we are targeting the individual case, we'll never be able to close the loop and make a big change. So I think right from when the urgent action starts to the end, we need to have a holistic plan which talks about what happened, which also shares, which also gives the individuals at risk to share their own stories of whether or not it worked. And I think that's also a great monitoring and evaluation tool for us.
Thank you so much. I think that you have both of you have great points. I think the sharing success and making sure that, you know, bring out the whole context of what's going on. It will spread. Hopefully, it's a part of more information to make people to make decisions and to be a bit aware of what's happening. I have a couple more questions. The second question that I received, that okay, like it seemed it seems like many years ago, the Amnesty Thailand was very cautious of using urgent actions in the case of Thailand, and very cautious of taking part on signatures, signing the letter. But now it has changed, that we are working on in Thailand and inviting people, brackets, which is a good thing. And why? And maybe I could share a little bit, and could like to, you know, like, do you see any positive or negative side on working at that, working in their own countries, and how does it work? Maybe for us, we felt that in Thailand, how do we stay relevant with the situations? I think we have been questioned many times with, you know, the different movements, social movements or other organizations, that that what are we doing issues inside the countries, and I think that's make us question ourselves quite a bit of why are we not working on the country that we are working with. Of course, the risk is a lot more prominent, especially with the people who are working on the ground as well. But I think we had collective decisions together with the board and with us to see that because we are on the ground, we know a lot of what's going on, and we're able to push and insert that information. And like Rung or other people said, not everyone wants to be in the streets, but maybe people just want to help out in many different kinds of work and deleting that opportunity, especially when the countries where not many human rights organizations are here, and the information doesn't go out or come in as much because of language barriers. It is very important for us to make sure that the conversation still circulate within the Thai society ourselves. So I think we took that step gradually, and think we have adapt the strategies over the times of how best does it work, where do we stand in the societies, and how we best utilize the amnesties or different tools such as urgent actions. But yeah, maybe I want to hear from Kun Alec. Do you see any differences between before and after? Do you think it's more dangerous, or is it better? And yeah, so what's your thought?
Yeah, the working on own country rule that used to be quite strong in Amnesty, where you were not supposed to campaign on individual cases in the country where you were a citizen or where you lived. It had three justifications. One that we've talked about, and that is the risk. It was thought that if somebody campaigns in Thailand on a violation of human rights of another Thai, that they themselves would be at risk. Now, obviously, this is true in some countries. It's very true in some countries, but it's much less true in other countries. And it's obviously something that is best going to be decided in that country. Even today, as far as I can tell, some urgent actions to do with Thai cases we don't campaign on in Thailand. We choose which ones we think are it's risk and return. Where do we think we will benefit from? Where do we think we'll get the best outcome? So that one, we should decide on the risk because it is the risk to us in Thailand. The next one was that we don't want people campaigning on their own country because the government, in most cases, the government is the one that is violating the human rights. And if you campaign against what the government is doing, the government will assume you are the opposition politically. And Amnesty is very clear that politically it is neutral. It does not support any particular political party. I've never quite bought this one. I mean, if you're not in opposition to the Russian government, what the hell are you? I mean, for God's sake, it's cut and dried. I mean, who cares if the government thinks you're in opposition? They think everybody's in opposition to them, and to a lesser extent, that's true in Thailand. So that one I didn't do. But the third one I think does have a lot of validity. The third reason for the working on own country rule was it's Amnesty International. The danger would be that if a country started campaigning on individual cases in that country, that would be pretty much what they did, full stop, because it's the one that gets most resonance. It's the one that's going to get most support. It's the one where you can strategize the best, where you're going to see the results most clearly. But that is dangerous. I don't think that's a reason for not campaigning in your own country, but I think it's a reason for saying, okay, we're going to campaign on this case in Thailand, but we are also committed to campaigning on somewhere else. Anybody who's going to join this is going to promise also to campaign on another case, an urgent action case or whatever. But I think we've really got to keep Amnesty International international, and we can't let it slide into a parochial view of human rights, the most important
มอง
human
ประเด็นในเป็นประเด็นในกว้างมากขึ้นประเด็นที่เชื่อมโยงกับประเทศอื่นนะฮะเพราะว่าสิทธิมนุษยชนมัน
Yes, thank you. And I think the making sure that we stay global and we stay in a way, I don't want to use this word borderless, but across the border, transnational human rights issues or cross-national human rights issues is still something that we tell ourselves that this is why the organizations built it itself, that's no matter how what is happening across the globe, we will make sure that there are messages being sent. I think last questions. I think this is something of the comments, and I think it's something that we can talk together. It was about the timeline of the urgent actions. Do you know the question? Do you know the approximate timeline does it take? What's the step? Sometimes Amnesty been seen that the not following up with the situation as quick as we can, and maybe even slower than compared to the situations. Maybe we'll go to technicality first. Maybe Emily, if you could help me with that to see what are have you been receiving any feedbacks, or how can we do things? And maybe Smithy, if you could just also help me on how do you feel the same or receive the same feedback as well, that that we might be slower than the actual situation, but if it is, how can we do better? But do you think this is good for us to stay in this pace and make sure that the information is being accounted for, and there's a check and balances when they come to what's it called, verifications and concerns wise?
Thanks, May. It would be interesting to know what the average time is for the creation of an urgent action. I know that it's certainly slower than it used to be, and there's probably various reasons for that. But just to give a general sense, I suppose, I imagine the average is probably about 4 or 5 days. Like it's not that we hear about the situation and the urgent action goes out the same day, unfortunately. There are so many steps behind it that it's normally just not feasible. And as we've highlighted already, there's particular things that have to be done, which do slow the process down, but we couldn't not do them. That relationship with and checking consent with the individual, the active participation comes into play there, and also all the verification of the information and the reviewing from various people, including the law and policy program, who have a huge amount of other outputs to review too. And that's a shame, but we do those things for a reason. If we didn't, then there could be impacts for the individuals. I'm sure we could be quicker, but of course there's also an issue of resources, and that means that there's less hands to deal with things quickly. And Smriti probably has a better sense of the impact that has.
Thank you. Thank you, Smithy. Smithy, are you still here?
Hi, sorry, I
Yeah.
think there was I got disconnected. In terms of timelines, it's a very interesting question, because we struggle quite a bit with the timelines. Emily explained the process and how much time it takes. And we have had some instances where by the time we figure out that we are doing an urgent action, the person is already out. So with that statement, I think it's really important. The timeline should really depend on the conversation that you're having with the person's family and and their lawyers. So essentially, I would say most time, by the time we decide to do urgent action, the time is taken in getting the information, speaking to the family, speaking to the lawyer, getting the consent of making the UA. After that is just populating the thing. So the 4 to 5 days that is taken is usually the time when you're speaking to the I would say the lawyers and the family. Then I also think that we do have the potential of reducing the law call time, which I think also makes a lot of sense. But in this case, I would say that it's important, even though we've become slower. I'll give you an example. For instance, in India, and Alec, this links to the point that you were talking about, Amnesty being international. In India, it's a different thing altogether. The moment you decide to do an urgent action on an individual who's at risk, there are people who are telling us not to do it because that becomes detrimental to their case, only because the amnesty has been demonized to a point in India where it is seen as this international organization, Western world coming and trying to meddle in our own business. And so for us to just kind of come and agree to do something for the person is just so difficult that it takes time. So I mean, I don't know if I answered the question correctly, but I think it is essential to spend that kind of time with the people that you're working for and with their families to understand the scope of case, to also do the risk mitigation properly and then do the urgent action.
Yeah, thank you, Smriti. Sharing the similarity of Thailand as well. I think it's for us, it's two things is to, before we're strategizing, this is going to be urgent actions. It takes a little bit of, how feasible it is, when it is, how it is. And I think in the same time for us, it's also getting in touch with the family, explaining the deal, because Amnesty in Thailand are not that popular. It's a bit in the popular towards individual groups, but not too popular to a larger society as well. Some, like those parents of the kids who've been or the children who've been criminalized, they still have a pretty much sometimes they still have a negative image towards Amnesty. And I think that's something that we do take time to explain it to them. And the second, I think this is just a suggestions, I think we soon can have like a form for campaigners, if we do urgent action, this is 10 things that you need from someone. So, we come with the information in hand, so we don't need to go juggle back and forth. And I think it's very important for us to make sure we're accountable. At the same times, we also need to, we could press the time to be a bit faster as well, because sometimes we've been, for example, right now the urgent actions of the update of urgent action for us, with the time differences wise and with the resource, it takes us sometimes to even to update the case of the urgent actions. Well, thank you so much, everyone. I think that has been a great journey. Looking back of what 50 years has come, or the learning journey. And I think that's something that we keep a really good mark, that it seems a very small, minuscule tools, but I think in the same way, it brings so many things together. It brings in actions, it brings solidarities, it brings people shining the light on both on those who are committing the injustice and those who are being left out in the prisons, or they thought it'd been forgotten. And I think, of course, with the 50 years come, I think we still need to develop and stay relevant when it comes to, use technicality of it. And especially in Amnesty Thailand, I think we have a long conversation to make sure that, how can we make it relevant, not just in the Thai cases, but the other global cases as well. Thank you so much, all the panelists, for coming today. And hopefully we will celebrate the 50 years together. And we hope one day there will be no urgent action because everyone has been released. And and thank you, Rome, thank you, Emily, thank you, Alex, and also thank you, Smriti, for joining us today. And we hope that today's conversation will create like an infographic out of it, and people around the people like different sections could share information. Thank you so much and have a good night.